And in this video I will be building Leon's Hatchet from Resident Evil Requiem. Originally I just wanted to cut the hatchet from a big plate of steel, but that would have cost 4 times as much as this giant thing. And this is almost double the material I need, if what I have in mind works. So to the forge it is. I guess it's time for my catchphrase. Maybe I didn't think this through. This feels suboptimal. There are 2 issues that came up while forging. The first is a tear in the material. The second is that the handle is too far back on the axe. My solution for that is, first of all, I will make a cut here to get rid of this. And then I will try to hammer what's left a bit forward. We will see if that works. Remember how I said forging was a good idea if it works? Well, it didn't. In the process of bending this shape downwards, I created a scrunching of material down here, and now I have plenty of cold shots, so this is pretty much unusable. But I came up with a different solution. What we have here is a fresh plate of C45, which I ordered during a mix-up with this material, so it was already here. And as you can probably make out, my idea is to cut out the head from this, use the handle from this, and weld those 2 together. While the fire behind me is heating up, let me talk you through the process, because as mentioned, welding C45 is rather difficult. First, I'll need to heat both of the pieces up in the forge. I won't use much airflow, because I only need to heat them up to around 250 degrees Celsius. Once they're up to temperature, I will bring them to my welding table, where I've already placed some stops so I can easily align them and don't have to fiddle with that. The welding process in and of itself is the same as with any other mild steel piece. And finally it's back to the forge to let it cool slowly. All of that was moderately stressful. Now I hope that this will keep the axe from cooling too fast. Right now I can't say if this worked. I will only see that after it has cooled down and I've ground the weld beads off. I guess it could still fail during heat treatment, but we will cross that bridge when we get to it. As a reoccurring theme on my Resident Evil builds, the handle scales will be 3D printed. For that, I've created the 3D model directly from an in-game image. But since my 3D printer can't print something this large, I have to cut it into halves. Usually I create handle scales and stuff like that after the shape of the actual blade is done. But because the shape of this handle is incredibly organic, I've created this one using a template taken from the game. And now I need to shape the blade to the handle scales. And to get the holes for the handle scales right, because that's a pretty important part, I'm trying to use a little metal insert where I can fit my little punch. In all those years I've been making video game weapons and been watching other people make video game weapons, there's just one thing I could never figure out. That is how to make angle grinding entertaining. Maybe I'll try a montage. The cutout on the spike is created by drilling a bunch of holes. Hammering out the piece. And then filing it to shape. Real quick, this is not the appropriate way to clamp this. What you would do is to take a bolt, like so, put them through these slots and then make a bracket to hold it down. But I'm too lazy to do that, and let's hope this won't be a disaster. And now that I put all those weak points and stress risers into the hatchet, I can move on to the blades. Well, there's usually something weird with these projects. This hatchet in particular is very weird. And one of the weirdest things about it is that it has a very slight taper from this red line, well, to the edge. But then there's also the edge bevel. I don't know why that's there. I don't really see a reason other than to make my life more complicated. This is honestly what I expected. The shallow angle makes it really easy to go over the edge. And next thing is, even if you get it relatively clean, the problem is that it's still not steep enough to really be noticeable. So you won't notice that the angle is on the replica, but it's on there. That's what's most important to me. While the forge is heating up for the hardening process, I want to talk you through a couple of things. First of all, the hatchet needs to be a gray color. For that, I want to just use the fire to get the entire thing hot to where it starts to become this scaly gray. After that, I will heat up the head of the axe, ideally keeping most of the heat away from the area where I've welded. The most important part when heating up the head for hardening is that the spikes don't overheat, so I will try to let them stick out of the coal. Dip the entire thing. I guess that's all. Since the hatchet sadly doesn't fit into the oven, I will have to temper it inside the forge again. The temperature in there is currently somewhere around 200 degrees Celsius. Now I will put these warmed up stones on top to keep the heat inside, just like inside an oven. And after an hour, this thing should be good. The coloring process using the heat worked out quite nicely, but there are two things I kinda didn't think about when doing this. First of all, since the blade or the steel shrinks during the quench, all the scale has flaked off near the edge, and also the blades on the hatchet in the game are all colored in this scaly gray, which with this technique is simply not possible. So instead I will have to apply cold bluing solution and then use a steel wire brush to remove most of it and hopefully get a matching tone. If not, I will have to clean this entire thing up and do everything with cold bluing solution. As explained earlier, I will apply a modest amount of cold bluing solution to the head of the hatchet. As you can see, this stuff turns black immediately. After both sides are thoroughly darkened, we rinse it off in water. And after that, dry it with the towel and also some air. And after that, we grab the steel wire brush and try to brighten it up again. If you're ever thinking about using the steel wire brush inside the drill without wearing at least safety goggles, look at what I just found. These are the bristles from the steel wire brush stuck inside the ceiling. You wouldn't want that in your face, let alone in your eyes. All that's left to do now is to put in an edge. To attach the handle scales, I'm using a pretty simple method. I'm just using these hex head bolts, well, with the inner hex head. Also pretty cool, they look like they have a washer underneath, which is pretty close to what you see in game. I screw those into a tube nut. Not sure if that's what they're called, but that's what I call them. And those will go into the handle scales, and then the bolt from the other side will secure everything tightly. Now all that's left to do is to sharpen the hatchet. Sadly, it's not quite that simple. Good thing that I decided to glue the handle scales together. Now I have to replace all 4 of them. But at least this allows us to check on the weld after all that chopping. And I see no damage.